That's funny. Well, you know why the Pope gets out the window and does this, right?
No,
He's saying, all you Italians off of the lawn. Hey, welcome to, we're going to start there, okay, David? So
Yep.
Welcome to the Giulio Show. We've got a great guest plan for you today. We want to recap a little bit of last week before we start. And remember last week, we talked about committing to finishing a task that you've been procrastinating. And guess who volunteered? Glenn did. Glenn said that by Sunday, he would have had his office cleared because he committed to finishing something he was procrastinating, which he said he wasn't procrastinating, but we know he was. So, Glenn, did you stick to your commitment?
See,
you did.
I didn't finish.
You didn't finish.
I didn't finish.
Why?
I had the lawn.
Oh, so
I forgot the lawn.
Oh, so something.
And we had to fertilize the lawn.
Now, was that urgent or was that important?
Yes, our lawn looks like poopy.
Okay. Well, so you see how things do, and you can't help it. So when you are procrastinating and you think you got something urgent to do, there's always that something that will creep in that you think is important. Now, he probably could have cut it later on that night, but he probably got up around noon. Am I right?
No, we got up earlier.
Yeah, earlier. What, 11:59?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you got up 11:59. By the time you ate and everything like that, you decided, oh, the lawn has to be done. You weren't thinking about the room, and this is the problem with procrastination. But we'll get more to that because today's guest is got some great. Oh my God, he blew my mind when I was at the John Maxwell event in Orlando this March, and he gave me the lowdown of this book called The Return of the Gods, which is really freaky when you read it or you listen to it, because what's happening today makes a lot of sense to what was written then, and he can do it better justice. But let me introduce a great friend that I met again at the John Maxwell IMC, who is a pastor and lives in Springfield, Illinois. Is that right? Springfield, Massachusetts?
Or no, Springfield, Illinois. Springfield, Illinois.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome Pastor David Swihart. I had to get it right. Swihart, right? Did I do it?
Yes. Yep, you got it. Thanks, Giulio.
Oh, no, thank you. And you know, I have to say, Pastor David, it was so, I didn't even know you were a pastor. You were so humble. And you and I worked together for a few days at the event with Maxwell. And we were hanging out, being goofy, having fun. And all of a sudden that dinner, my wife and child and I ran into you, and we started talking and found out you were a theologist too as well. Am I right? You knew a lot about theology.
There you go. That's a good way to put it. I've studied theology. That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
I wouldn't quite categorize myself as a theologian necessarily, but I've studied theology.
Well, I'll tell you what, because I'm going to let you do a lot of the talking today, but what you brought to me was understandable. Most people that I ask certain questions to, because there is a lot of questions when it comes to the biblical world, right? A lot of things we don't understand, but you made it so understandable. And then we got carried away because once I start picking, I'm a why kid, why? And you were so patient with me, and you were definitely understandable. And I'm like, we got to talk. But then you gave me a book to read, but you explained it to me, and that was The Return of the Gods. And what really blew me away is what's happening in the world today is the result of the return of these gods. Now, we were always taught, David, and you can help me understand this, Pastor. We are taught that there is one God and we worship one God. Is that because there are many gods and this God is very jealous and he wants you only to worship him? Or are these false gods?
That is a great question, Giulio. And I think what we have to look at, and I mean, let's go right in the Bible says that our battle is against the spiritual forces of evil in this dark world. Now, and what you said is absolutely true. We have one God and one God only. But there are a lot of spiritual beings that we don't completely understand that try to set themselves up as gods and try to take that role from our only one true God. Okay. And so when we're thinking about this, we have to realize that when we talk about somebody like Baal, or we talk about someone like Ashtoreth, or I mean, Baal is the predecessor of Zeus. I mean, his name in I think in Roman or Greek is Baal Zeus. So it's actually part of that name. This
Now,
Baal is
Baal, just so I get this right, because his name comes up a lot. He is like the head of all these gods that are returning, correct?
yes,
And he was
he
the
is
first one to come to the West.
yes, he's this powerful God who likes to just bring in the question, is God the only God? Is he
Mm.
the only God? Is this the only way? Isn't there other possibilities? Can't you do this and God? I mean, he's asking these syncretistic questions of how do we synchronize what we want with what God wants, and brings in this mixed bag of things. Yes. So Baal
So,
is
but
a
you
very
made something
powerful
very
God.
interesting, because
Hmm.
the theme of this story is at one time, all these gods existed in the eastern part of the world,
Hmm.
but they were cast out by God. And when you
Yes.
cast out demons, like he did
Mm,
with the demons, he casted uh, out of the man he ran into the road. And my stories are terrible, but when he ran into him, he cast them out, and they asked to be cast into the pigs because they have to
mhm.
have a host. And then they
Yes.
killed themselves. The pigs drowned themselves.
Hmm.
But in the meantime, while these gods were cast out, they had to find a home, and they found it here in America. I'll let you talk more about that because you had a brilliant way of describing that.
Well, the parable that Jonathan Kahn uses in the book is the concept of a man has a evil spirit in him, and it's cast out, and it leaves him as it's created. But if the person doesn't replace that spirit with anything else, when that spirit comes back after it's gone through all these arid places, it comes back, and he finds the house swept clean and nobody living there. So he goes and finds seven more wicked spirits and comes and lives in that person. And so
So wait
that
a
what
minute. So if
happened.
you lose one evil spirit, you will gain seven more.
Okay, well, not exactly, because the key piece is we didn't replace it. Because the thing
Uh,
is when we drive something out, it has to be replaced with something. And if we replace that with God's Holy Spirit, there's no room for that person to come, that spirit to come back.
so that's how we protect ourselves. Is we say we filled it with God's Holy Spirit, so the other seven of you take a hike,
Correct.
get
Yeah, when
lost.
he
You're
comes
not
back,
coming in
the
this
house is
body.
filled. The house is filled because we're now living in a different way. We're no longer susceptible to that. But this is something we've got to constantly be on our guard against because one of the greatest dangers that we face in the Christian life is the term passivity. Passivity, a passive mindset and attitude toward the spiritual forces. This is where these so-called gods, spiritual forces shine. Is when we are passively just going about our business and not paying attention to them, that's where they shine.
What do you mean by that? We're not paying attention to them, because most people are saying, "Well, if I don't pay attention to them, they'll go away." But
Absolutely.
you have a meaning behind that.
Correct. Yes, because when I think about this, Julia, what I look at is we have everything our eyes and our senses can experience. I mean, we go outside, it's either warm or cold. I mean, where I'm at right now, it's warm, but it's really windy. We look around and, the leaves are budding, things are starting to take shape, those things are happening. We can experience all that. We can smell the rain on the air. We can experience those things. When we talk about the spiritual world, all we get is little senses here and there. Some people more in tune with it than others, but you can't really always see what's going on. And so because we can't always see what's going on, it's very easy to lose sight of it, to not engage with it. And even for most Christians, they don't know how to engage with it because they have never been shown a pathway to recognize that spiritual warfare that's going on. I mean, okay, you got to talk about procrastination. Okay, there's two types of demon involvement in our lives. There's what they call demon possession. That's what we see a lot in Scripture. This demon's inside the person and is a something that has to be driven out. That spirit that has to be driven out. But there's also what they call demon oppression. And demon oppression is when the demons are just attacking you like crazy. And one of the ways that they do that, and I don't know the biggest, but one of the ways they do that is through lack of focus and negative suggestion. You don't really need to do that. You're not the right guy for that. You don't want to do that, which leads into our procrastination.
Hmm.
So, take your procrastination conversation deeper. From a point that could be just as much the demon spiritual forces trying to keep you from getting things done that you need to be doing.
And who would they be in that group of gods?
And see, this is what we don't know because we don't know all their names. I mean, it's very fascinating. You mentioned the story about Jesus driving the demons into the pigs. That is the only demon Jesus ever asked his name, period.
Uh,
So the legion of demons that comes out, he says, "We are legion because for we are many." That's the only one he ever named, which means Jesus recognized him as a powerful demon in that area or demon group. So we don't really know all of their names, and I think that's intentional because people who would worship them the same way they worship our God because they're setting themselves up as gods.
okay, so so you bring up the oppression, which is demon, which is, yeah, those. And people always say I fight my demons every day. Right
Hmm.
now, we're fighting the demon across the street who's playing his music at way above the decibels. Can you hear the booming in the background?
You got good filters.
Okay, good. Anyway, be gone. But here's the
Yeah.
thing: and this is kind of fascinating. You said that at one point he drove them out, and that was Zeus, Aphrodite, all these people we see as good gods. Like, oh, the goddess
Hmm.
of love, the goddess of this, the goddess of that. Explain some of those gods, because as you explained it,
Hmm.
is they couldn't find a place in the East anymore, so they found a new home, because like you said, they have to find a new home and they have to
Hmm.
live in it. So where did they come to? The West, the United States. And explain how
Hmm.
they're using from what they used to use, the old traditional way, and how they adapt to the new ways, and how they
Hmm.
relate to each other,
Yeah.
what's happening today. I just, there's so many questions I have that I think I'm way ahead of me.
Sure. Well, and I think, Giulio, I think the first thing I want to do is kind of give a parallel because maybe some of your listeners, and I use this with you in Orlando, but maybe you saw that old Robin Williams movie Jumanji, where they've got this board game Jumanji. And the board game sucks them into playing the game, and all these crazy events happen, and then they finally finish the game, and the movie goes on. Well, that board game is put in a closet and forgotten about until you have the new movie Jumanji come out, and they find the old board game. Well, it's given to a kid who's sitting there playing on his Nintendo, and the dad gives it to him, says, "Hey, this could be fun. Why don't you get off your video game and play on the board game?" And Jumanji, so he gets to get handed this game. He throws it up on the shelf and doesn't even look at it, keeps playing his game. Well, this box all of a sudden pays attention, goes, "Oh, video games are the new thing," and it turns into a video game. Then the kid looks in the box, says, "Oh, it's a video game," plugs in his thing. He gets sucked in the same way that Robin Williams was sucked into the old board game, and they've got another story. And the demons do the exact same thing because in the ancient world, they worshipped by statues being set up to them. They had stories about them. They had all of these incredible things that they were working on. And so, I mean, they were in the public eye. I mean, people knew them. And now in parts of the world, these are still true. Okay, there are still places in the world that recognize all these spirits at different levels. Now, how to completely describe them as demons, who they are, and I mean, I don't know how to get into that exactly here. But I mean, there's still places in the world, in Africa and Haiti and different places where you talk to a missionary, they'll tell you these things are real, they're alive, people are affected by them, there's possession, there's worship of them.
Is that
And
what
so
they
there's all
call
those,
witchcraft? Because in Africa and Haiti and all that, they study a lot of that from voodoo dolls, but it's
yes.
creepy because people actually uh, say it works. And that's
And there
scary.
is
But I
power.
mean, if you have
And
God, you don't have to be scared, but it actually, weird things happen.
absolutely. We we live in a very spiritual world, and most of us don't recognize, just like this board game. I mean, there's a time when everybody played board games. Now there's a time everybody plays video games. And these so-called gods used to need statues and stuff. Well, they don't care about the statues. They want you to worship them in the new ways. And so they give us the internet. They give us TV shows. They give us other places where the things that they value are highlighted, the music, I mean, we could go into so many different places. I mean, where do they show up? Okay, well, we can't get this generation of older people. Let's get the kids. So they show up in curriculum, they show up in books, they show up in novels, and
Okay,
they don't
stop
even
right
need
there.
their
So
name
what you're
mentioned.
talking about is the school system right now, the
Yep.
wokeism in what they're teaching our kids today, because it did make, and this just didn't happen during COVID like people think. This
No.
was in works for a very long time, but after that, it came on really strong to where, like you said, they're going after our kids. So not only on social media, they're using those platforms, but also in what they're teaching inside the classroom. You want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Oh, and I mean, we could probably in the next 3 hours talking about that, Giulio. But I think really what's happening is, and this is the thing we have to realize. I mean, if you are a person of faith listening to this is an attack on who we are worshiping. I mean, this is the ultimate question: is who are we worshiping? Are we worshiping the true one and only God, the God that's presented and revealed in the Bible, who has made himself known through the person of Jesus Christ, or are we worshiping something else? And when you worship something else, your values change, your morals change, everything changes. And that's what we're seeing in our school system. We're seeing a different deity, and they wouldn't even call that. They wouldn't even like this conversation. Okay. But but as Christians, we have to talk about it in the way that it's true, and that is that we're dealing with a spiritual battle that our kids are facing every day, and most of them are ill-equipped, if not completely unequipped, to battle it. And so they're just completely indoctrinated into another belief system, into another faith system, and they don't even know they're worshiping other gods.
Yeah. It's funny because I was just watching the news, and Tampa, Florida, in Hillsborough County, the parents actually stood up to the school board and were reading the books that were in the library that the kids, not junior high kids, not your high school kids, but your elementary school kids, and it was very graphic on sex that was more like sodomy,
Yes.
an improper description of not just normal intercourse. They were talking about, excuse me, but they were talking about fisting and everything in a way that was just disgusting in these books that these kids are reading. And the school board, how did they get into these libraries? Are these the people? I mean, the gods didn't just snap their fingers. They're using people to put them in there, correct? Is that what
Oh,
we're
absolutely.
talking about?
This has been, I mean, this has been an agenda for so long. And I mean, we could trace it back. I mean, Jonathan Kahn does a great job. Like I said, go back, read the book. I don't want to steal all his thunder because he's got incredible things to say. But I had a friend, well, I should call him an acquaintance, that I knew fairly well. And he had been involved in the homosexual circuit in the 70s in New York City. Okay. He was in conversations in the 1970s in the gay community talking about how do we become mainstream? How do we take this movement, make it mainstream? And they wrote down an agenda. Now, I wish I could tell you all the agenda. He probably shared it with me. I've slept since then. You get that. But I mean, at the time when he's telling me this, early 2000s, it's not as big of a deal. I mean, we haven't legalized gay marriage. We haven't legalized. I mean, it hasn't become front and center as much at that point. So I wasn't paying much attention. I wish I could go back and talk to him. He's since passed on. But I mean, he's talking about, they had an agenda back then. How do we get this in? We need to talk about our history. We need to talk about, we need to make it normal. We need to educate people on what it looks like. And the thing is they have had an agenda for 50 plus years that I'm aware of. Now, who knows how long before that? I mean, that's just, information from an insider that I learned. Now, Jonathan goes even further into it in the book and talks about some events that happened in New York City. And I mean, when you listen to them, I mean, I don't want you to lose the shock value of them, or your readers to lose the shock value.
Well,
Because I mean, I would highly recommend.
we know what to
Yeah,
prepare
because
for, because now you got a lot of people
yeah,
asking questions like, is it saying that they purposely, that these people aren't gay, are gay? I mean, because that could open up another Pandora's box. But what is
oh,
the actual point behind that? Because you talked about one of the gods who created this
mhm.
rainbow
Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah.
following.
Ishtar. Ishtar is one of the gods. She's known as Astarte, Ashtoreth in the Bible, and she turns into Aphrodite in the Greek and Roman world. And Ishtar was a goddess who was a gender changing goddess who wanted to separate the difference between men and women, who wanted the men to become more like women, the women to become more like men. She was a warrior and goddess of war, but she was also a god of love and intimacy. I mean, you go into it, it's unbelievable what she was, and you look around and it's like, oh my gosh, I mean, everything her cult was about is happening all around us. Being involved in it. I mean, she had temple prostitutes who were castrated, who were there available for sexual acts to be done with them. She had there's descriptions of these different sex acts on the walls of her temples. I mean, her women were encouraged to dress more butch and look more like men. And I mean, these are things that happened in the process of her worship. I mean, she had a festival in the month of Tammuz, which turns into our month of June. I mean, these are things that people
That
are asking the
festival was
wrong
based on,
questions.
though, which is Gay Pride Month, okay, but
Hmm.
was based on, and she was not. She had a husband who passed away, I guess you said, and he was
Hmm.
resurrected. But under the terms of this resurrection, there was 1 month she couldn't see him, and that was in June. And so, what did she make happen in June?
She wanted people to mourn her loss. She wanted people to mourn her loss of Tammuz, who she actually killed in jealous anger. And then during that month, then she celebrated his resurrection. And it was the resurrection of her ability to have him back, but she did that through her cult worship with an unrestrained sexual act. And like you said, the symbol that was her symbol was the rainbow. And so there's ancient texts, and Jonathan Cahn did such a good job of going into those ancient texts and running, who how some of these things were talked about, how the rainbow flag would be flying in honor of Ishtar, how how her parade and celebration would happen. I mean, there are just so many pieces to it, and you look at it, and it's like, oh my
So,
goodness,
what you're saying is
there are
this
people
was
doing this.
predicted
Yes,
thousands of years ago or hundreds of
yeah,
years ago?
we're talking thousands. I mean, we're talking. I
Thousands.
mean,
So we're
ancient
talking thousands of
Babylon.
years ago. They predicted that this flag would be flying and this month would be the month of Gay Pride. But let's go beyond Gay Pride, because you know okay, I'm all for, there are people, not all for, but I mean, there are people who believe they're attracted to the same sex. However, there are some issues I'm having with transgenders of men transgendering into women, but yet are abusing
Hmm.
little girls and kids. But that's a whole nother subject. We could see the evilness taking place in all that,
Hmm.
and we could probably get in conversations like crazy about that. But there's also other things happening, such as war. I mean,
Yep.
the tensions are in the air.
Oh, sure.
What is this that they brought? They picked the West because they knew it was a new country, and they knew they could influence people. So that not only did they influence them in the way of what's going on in our schools, the big the big push for people getting operations. And when you're an adult, hey, do whatever you want. You make your choice. You follow the God you want to. I know which one I'm going to follow. You probably know the one you're going to follow, and that's the one
Sure.
up above that had his son Jesus Christ come here and try to save us as well. Uh, but whatever you do is, in that whole trinity of all that, or actually not trinity,
Hmm.
but in that whole case of
Yeah.
that is, do not use the kids who cannot make a decision for themselves yet, who are confused. Give them time to understand who they are and what they want, rather than just no different than we do in religion, right? When they're first born, we pick a religion for them. because they
Mhm.
can't speak, they don't know yet, right? They haven't learned yet. So we do the choices for them, and then we educate them along the way. And when they get old enough, they can confirm their own religion, their own identity, and we're not
Mhm.
concerned about this. But now this is just a small part of the other parts that are happening from like this lawless country. You can commit a crime, rape somebody, do whatever you want, and you're back on the streets. You can cross the border as a terrorist and do this, and you're out there. You can get arrested 100 times as an illegal immigrant and still be out on the street, a free man or a free woman,
Mhm.
doing whatever you please. So where does this all? Because eventually this is all going to implode somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, okay, I mean, there's so many pieces we could pull out of that, but the thing I mean, I still want to come back to they're being trained to worship just like a church kid or a Muslim kid or a Jewish kid is being taught to worship. I mean, these kids who are being gender changed, who are being indoctrinated into, various sexual acts and things. I mean, this is exactly what the cult of Ishtar did. They took the unwanted kids and turned them into priests. They took the kids who their parents would dedicate them to the temple, and they'd be castrated at an early age. I mean, these things happened in the ancient world. These are not new things. That's the thing that a lot of us don't understand. I mean, a lot of us want to think, oh, this is all, just brand new, and a lot of churches get on this bandwagon of, we gotta protest all this. And it's like, no, we've got to deal with who they're worshiping first, because if you don't change the who they're worshiping, you can't change any behaviors.
So the key of what you're saying is you can talk about all these evil introductions, all these evil gods, all these things that are happening, but the focus is not to focus on them, because what you
Hmm.
focus on is what you draw yourself closer to, is to
Correct.
focus on what is going to save you at the end. And there's only one God, a
Hmm.
true God, who is there for you. Now, is this God, and I'm going to ask on behalf of
Hmm.
myself and all these people, because you hear he is the Almighty God, and with one point of his finger, he could destroy all this evil. He could change the world like he did in, Noah's days. He just flooded and clean this crap up. Let's get
Hmm.
rid of everybody. Put some people on an ark here. Um, why doesn't he do that? If he is the Almighty and he's got power over Baal
Hmm.
and Aphrodite and all these other people, or Zeus, why doesn't he just destroy the evil and bring the peace back? Why
Hmm.
for thousands of years? Look at Israel. Look at Ukraine. I mean, look at all the things that
Hmm.
are happening. Why? Why can't he
Yep,
just?
absolutely. I can. Let's tackle that. Let's tackle that because that is a big question in a lot of people's minds, and I think there's two answers. First of all, our God is patient and wants all people to be saved. So let's start there. Is He's long suffering is the old word, meaning he takes a long time to wait for a long time to make sure that as many people as possible can respond to him. So that's why he doesn't end it in a moment. Because right now, if he did that, there'd be a lot of people who wouldn't have a chance to know him. So there's the
Yeah,
first
give me
part of
some
it.
time, God. Give me.
Yeah. Well, all of us, right?
Correct.
The
Correct.
second thing,
None of us are without sin, right?
correct, correct. The second piece of this, and I heard this quote. I wish I could give credit where credit's due, but the guy said the reason evil still exists is because the church hasn't fulfilled its role.
Mm.
God put us.
Elaborate on that a little bit more.
Okay, I'm,
That'd
I'm
be
going
good.
to. I'm going to. God put each of us who believes in Jesus Christ, each person who calls themselves a Christian, on this earth, start bringing His kingdom into this world. And when we talk about God's kingdom, we talk about peace, we talk about patience, we talk about love, we talk about unity, we talk about goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness. We talk about self-controlled individuals. We talk about mercy. We talk about grace. We talk about justice. We talk about right living and righteousness. I mean, we talk about all of those things, and as Christians, our responsibility is to bring those things into place. And I mean, I didn't say truth, but truth is another critical piece of that. And so, all of those pieces are the things that the Christians are supposed to be bringing out, and those are the things that bring healing into this world. I mean, what's how do we deal with it with all of this evil in the world? The church stands up. The church unleashes itself. I mean, that's one of the things that, I mean, God gave me a phrase a couple years ago, and it's become my mission. Our church is, our Christians need to unleash their voices. They need to speak truth. They need to talk about our God, and they need to bring into light the truth, because so many people have moved away from it.
Do you think they moved away, David, because in the some of the Christian churches or Roman Catholic, I mean, everybody's got Lutheran, they all got their beliefs, right?
Sure.
But I think when people become born again or new Christians, a lot of them become more judgmental.
Hmm.
You know, they become more prosecutors. They turned a lot of people off to the church because they're like, no, you can't come to my church because you're a sinner. What the hell
Hmm.
were you? You were
Yep.
the biggest sinner of them all, and yet
Absolutely.
you're criticizing somebody else. So I think the church did wrong without teaching, by teaching the people that they shouldn't hang with the sinners when Jesus, that's all he hung with, because they were the sickest.
Hmm.
But these churches, I believe, did an injustice. First of all, the Catholic with all the child molestation, right? I mean, the pedophiling.
Hmm.
The reborn Christian church did it in a bad way, where you're fine, you're going to go to heaven, everyone else is going to go to hell, so don't hang with them. Matter of fact, they're all sinners. But that's what the job is that Jesus has taught us, is to go out and save sinners. So you know, once
Yeah.
again, you're right. It starts in the church, but how do we get the church to teach their people this is the mission? Not just because you come once a week and hear the word, that is great, but shouldn't they be teaching how to go out there and pleasantly modeling the process rather than shoving it down your throat what a bad person you are?
Well, I think absolutely. I mean, I absolutely agree with you, because the thing is if we start with judgment, we get nowhere. I mean, if I start judging you immediately and say, well, we'll just go simple. I don't like your glasses. I'm not going to talk to you because I don't like your glasses.
Sorry.
For, well, but I mean, okay, so you have an opportunity then to immediately change your behavior in front of me. Okay, well, I won't wear them if you don't like them, right? I mean, and again, that's a simple thing. I mean, hopefully, glasses versus non-glasses is no longer an issue. I mean, when I was in school, I mean, that was not popular, so you ended up, 4 eyes and all that. Now there's kids wearing that don't even have prescriptions because it's cool to wear glasses now. So
Yeah.
hopefully, talking about glasses isn't. But see, that's the thing. When we pick on something, okay, a couple years ago it was all the beards because Duck Dynasty came out, and is it okay to have a beard, right? And all these and all of a sudden we have all these beards showing up that we never saw before, because that was not the appropriate way to wear a beard.
I woke
You
up
know,
like this. I shaved yesterday. I don't know what the
all right, we got Santa Claus in the place. We've seen those movies. um, but see, the thing is we could pick whatever we want to pick, and that's my point. And we can pick on it, because what are we against today? What are we against today? What's the group we're gonna boycott? Group we're going to come down on today? We're against this. We're against this. We're against this. We're against this. And I mean, I've heard so many
God today,
sermons.
everybody's against everything. Uh,
Exactly. And I mean, and Giulio, my question for the church and for the Christians listening to this podcast: what are you for? I mean, it comes back to Jeff Henderson's book. I mean, we've got to meet Jeff Henderson through the Maxwell team. I mean, he asked that incredible question. What are you for? Are you for bringing positive change into the world? Are you for making a difference in the world? Are you for bringing truth into the world, but not just shoving it down people's throats, but truly bringing people into a place where they are in a conversation with you and willing to have a good conversation? I
how
mean,
would you
that's, I mean,
start
that,
that though? Would you go up to somebody and you're talking and just, what are you for? I
yeah.
mean, does that come out of the blue? It's like,
Well,
hey, because people do speak their opinion. I think once they
mhm,
start their opinion, that is a good question to ask: is what do you
mhm,
believe and what are you for?
yeah. Well, and I think
Stop
those are,
telling
I
me what
mean,
you think.
well, and I'm very much about relational evangelism, if we're going to use that word evangelism. I'm not big on that term anymore, because it's really relationship and telling God's story. That's what I look at. If we can tell God's story, God does the rest. I mean, if we can tell what he's done throughout history, I mean, I look at it and say, okay, God created the world, created it exactly how he wanted it, perfect, knowing we were going to mess it up. And so Adam and Eve, whether they're real people or representative people, doesn't even matter. People messed it up, but he had a plan before that even happened because he wanted to have a relationship with his creation. So he chose then to walk a path to show people what it took to be in a relationship with him. So the first people get to figure that out through sacrifice. They had everything they did wrong. They had to offer a sacrifice. I mean, Giulio, there are not enough animals in the world for me to sacrifice to cover the things I've done wrong.
Oh my God. When I read that through Genesis, I was like, whew, I would have trouble catching a lot of pigeons.
Well, that's it. I mean, are there enough pigeons in the world and sheep and goats and cattle and oxen and whatever else you're supposed to sacrifice to even begin to cover what I've done, right? And he showed them that. I mean, he says, here's the law, here's the rules. You break them, here's what you got to do. Even when you don't break them, here's what you got to do because you can't do it. And so he knew he had to show them, though, what he required and show them how far short they were of that standard. And by doing that, he prepares the road for Jesus to come. Because he knew that Jesus was the only one that could fulfill the letter of every single one of those laws. He could do everything that God required in the heart of the law, not just the words of the law. Go into the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus is talking, and all these righteous people are like, "Oh, I've never murdered anybody. I've never committed adultery. I've never, never done this, never done that." I mean, they're going through this list, right? They're rubbing their chest, going, "Okay, I'm good there." And Jesus goes, "Okay, let's talk about murder for a minute. Hey, have you been angry with your brother? Anybody ever felt like you hated your brother? You're just as bad as the murderer." Whoa, time out. What? Okay, sure, you've never physically committed adultery, but how many women you looked at lustfully? Okay, let's not even go there.
Oh, let's not talk about that because listen, I go to the gym and God has to forgive me because today they wear painted on spandex, and you can't help but look. He says, "Gouge, you're better off gouging your eyes out." I'd be blind and crippled by the time I got done with me. It's not like I mean to have those lustful moments, but my God, you can't help because it is I believe it's the evil part trying to grab your attention to pull you in and commit that, even though I would not because I'm very faithful to my wife.
Oh, absolutely.
And I love her.
And, well, but this is the point, is we can't ever measure up. I mean, if we're just going to try to do the laundry list thing, we can't do it. That's the whole point. I mean, I read a devotional years ago. I mean, I've read dozens of devotionals, and they come and go, and a lot of them have some great things. They hit me in the moment, whatever. But one that has stuck with me for over a decade, one day in one book, was from Henry Nouwen. And Henry Nouwen, he started out with a question that blew my mind. When is the last time you thanked God for your sin?
You thanked him?
When is the last time you thanked God for your sin? That was the question.
Thanked him for my sin? Oh my God, I'd be thanking him constantly.
Well, okay.
I don't get that one. Explain that one. What do you mean?
Well, and this is, like I said, it blew my mind. I'm like, what do you mean? I've never thanked God for my sin. I don't thank God for my sin. I confess my sin, right? Nouwen then went on for a paragraph to say, I am so grateful that I sin because it reminds me how much I need his grace, how much I need his mercy, how much I need Jesus every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as we think,
what you're saying, you're thanking him because it's a reminder because there will always be temptation, no matter what, whether it be, picking, eating a piece of fruit in the grocery store without paying for it, like grapes, like my father used to do, or in my case, and people are like, I don't look at the girls or the guys in the gym. I see the girls staring at the guys, taking quick peeks. I see all men peeking at the girls, quick peek, but they all dress and and act the way they do because they know they're attracting attention. Mm-hmm. But we got to be thankful that we have a God that you're saying is saying, hey, thank you for reminding me that is a sin and I didn't act upon it and I didn't put myself in a situation that could have gone wrong. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's even taking it further than that. It's saying,
Ooh,
God,
give me
I'm
there.
grateful. I am grateful that I have lust in my life. Not because I want to lust, not because I intend to step out of my wife, not because I intend to do anything with that lust, but because I lust, I still know that I need you. Because the day that you and I talk, so let's say we talk again next week, okay, just theoretically, right?
We
And
will.
we come back and we say we had a perfect week. We did not look at one woman lustfully for the entire week.
I'd be
Okay,
lying to
so
you.
well, you and I both, right? But here's the thing: if we said that, and even if we had physically somehow accomplished that, we're starting to get to the point where we can say we don't really need God any longer. We're
Yeah.
moving toward that direction.
I get what you're saying. Okay. So, and God wants to be needed.
Correct. He wants us to know that we need Him.
Okay. Well, you know, it's funny because I didn't only confess to God, but I went home. I said, honey, because I started a new gym, and I said,
Yeah,
I have to be honest with you. I said, not that I would ever act upon it. I says, but the way they dress at the gym now and everything is just hanging and painted on. I says, I, I said, you got to forgive me, but I look, and sometimes I catch myself staring, and I don't mean to. I just want to do my workout.
yeah.
But I come home and crave you. But I had to almost confess to her because it is today's world, no matter where we go, even when we're out at a bar drinking or we're hanging
Sure.
out at someone's house, we're tempted with so many things. um, don't get me wrong, I used to be attracted to cocaine back in the 80s.
Hmm.
Am I still attracted to it? Probably if it was put in front of me, but I know that I wouldn't do it for many reasons. I don't want
Sure.
to end up how I did back in the 80s by losing everything. I knew it was a part of my life that was filled with lies, deceitfulness, people stealing,
Hmm.
fake friends. So I have to be grateful and thankful for that experience, and thankful that God, Jesus, saved me from that experience, and now I could help other
Absolutely.
people. So sometimes, do you feel we are given those things and live those things so we may help many others?
Absolutely. I mean, I've always said, God, everything that God has happened to you in your life, everything, God can and will use if you allow Him to. Now, with a quick caveat to that, we have to be a wounded healer.
Mm,
Be a wounded
I like
healer.
that, wounded healer.
And it's another book by
Yes.
Henry Nouwen. If you haven't ever read The Wounded Healer by Henry Nouwen, it's a great book. But what Nouwen says is we can't heal people if we've not been healed ourselves. And it's thinking about that major cut. So let's take you brought up cocaine. So cocaine addiction, whatever addiction, pornography addiction, you name that addiction, and you can't bring
Food.
healing to food. I was gonna say food, entertainment, media. I mean, heck, I almost got that little device in our pockets. I mean, it doesn't matter
Mhm.
what those things are. We have to be healed from it before we can bring healing to others. And we have to keep in mind that we're a wounded healer because God is the ultimate healer. And even
Yeah.
He,
And you know, it reminds
Jesus,
me of a story that the Dalai Lama, uh, now I don't know what he represents. I think he's the Pope for some kind of religion, right? But
but
he a mother went up to the Dalai Lama and said, "Could you tell my child that eating chocolate is a sin and they shouldn't eat it, and so on and so forth?" And he says, "I can't do that." And she's like, "Why?" He goes, "Because I love chocolate myself, and I'd be lying."
yes, yes, yes. Well, and that's why, like I said, and I mean, I've heard a similar story told about Gandhi, where he said, "Come back tomorrow," and so the mom brings the kid back tomorrow the next day, and then he says whatever the mom wanted to say, and she goes, "Well, couldn't you say that yesterday first?"
Oh, wait, you skipped out on that because he said
He
what?
he said, "I have to stop first."
So what? No, you're right. It was Gandhi. It wasn't the Dalai Lama.
Yeah,
Thanks for correcting me, and you did that so
yeah,
gracefully and so nicely. You can correct me straight out. I won't get offended. But I do get my stories mixed up because I'm
no
going to always
problem.
use this excuse, and it's not an excuse actually. Is I do have a short term memory. I have a long term memory, but I have short term memory problems and dyslexia. But if I hear it again, it'll come back. But thank you
Mhm.
for correcting me on that, and you did that.
Yeah,
Listen, everybody, take that example. You see what he just did. Even when somebody's talking about faith, you don't have to say no, you're wrong, because that's where you turn people off, right?
Hmm.
Pastor, is you turn them
Yep.
off by saying, no, you're wrong. When you should sit there and say, well, that's one way of looking at it. Here's another way of looking at it. Or
Yeah.
here's a story I heard. I love that.
Well, and see, that's, I mean, I love the storying concept of Bible teaching, because what it does is, a lot of missionaries use it. You can find it online if you search out storying, so like story with an ing on it. And what they do is they tell the story and then have the people repeat it back, and they go through a process of thinking through the story. A lot of oral cultures use this process to pass on their traditions, and it's actually scary how well they remember them. But the concept is, you bring people into God's story and you let God start to shape their hearts about who He is, what He stands for, what He believes, which then creates a community around people who've been formed by God, which then ultimately adjusts behavior. And if you go backwards, it never works. I mean, if you start going after behavior, if you start trying to change people's behavior, they just rebel against it. There's no reason, there's no foundation for me to change my behavior. But
Yeah.
what happens is, behaviors create a set of beliefs. Beliefs create a theology. I mean, people who believe that you can't do it, that you need to have this whole laundry list. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. Their God is a disciplinary God who punishes you for everything you do wrong, because their theology is shaped on their behavioral expectations.
And I think John Maxwell put it too, is some people think they have to, and thank you, Led Zeppelin, for the song, but by the stairway to heaven.
Hmm.
They think that every step they take has to be fulfilled with, I did this nice thing, I served
Yep.
at a soup kitchen. They're buying their way, and they're buying each step thinking that's how they're going to get to heaven, when basically to get to where we're going, and we're seeing such a revolution happen amongst Gen Z, is to follow the word of God, of love, hope, um, values. And you're
Yep.
seeing, they showed it on Fox not too long ago, is this revolution that happened. Remember the 70s revolution, the
Hmm.
Christian revolutions, that the hippies
Yep.
all turned to
Yep. Yep.
Jesus, right? It's happening now with Gen Zs. They're going to colleges. I forget what it's
Hmm.
called,
I saw it in
but
Georgia, I think, recently.
yeah, and they're filling stadiums with these
Yep.
college kids who are
Yep.
giving themselves to Christ, and actually, that they didn't have places to baptize them, so they would fill up the
Yeah.
back of their pickup trucks
Yep.
and
I
baptize
saw
them in the
that. I
back of
saw
the.
that video. It's amazing. It's amazing. If you guys haven't seen it, I mean, check that out on YouTube. It's an amazing testimony.
What is that movement called? Is us, something us, for us,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. I don't
with us, or
remember. I didn't.
I don't know.
I
I don't know what
forget.
it.
But it was. It's a great. I mean, you can find it. Just search out pickup truck baptisms or something like that. It should pull up the news story and things. And they've got a
But what
whole.
you heard from the Gen C, I mean, Gen Z, excuse me, not C. We went down the alphabet there a little bit. But Gen Z is that they actually didn't realize how they were being
Hmm.
indoctrinated into this wicked world.
Hmm.
And finally, their eyes are starting to open, because they're realizing that they're being bought or being sold lies,
Yes.
and being sold, and selling their souls to the wrong people.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a great movement. It was long in coming. I mean, I felt something coming, but that is going to shift more towards faith, Pastor. But I,
Hmm.
I can tell you this: we got still a long way to go,
Oh yeah.
uh, and I don't want to see the worst happen. I'd love to see the skies open up and Jesus come. I think I know I'm ready.
Yeah.
I don't fear death in that sense. But like you said, I didn't think about it this way. If he did come now, and if he wasn't a patient God, my goodness, how many of us would be left? Not that all people are
Exactly.
bad. They're wonderful.
Nope.
Everybody's got a great heart. It's just drawing the sometimes the kindness out has been very difficult, in especially
Hmm.
in this world of skyrocketing mental health.
Sure. Yeah.
You know,
Well, absolutely. And it just, it points to the need for something that's bigger than us. I mean, scientists are coming to the conclusion that there has to be a start to the universe, and that starter has to be a creator, a designer. I mean, I mean, they're admitting that there's just not a way for this complexity to exist. I mean, there's secular scientists coming out and saying these things. Then you've got so many pieces they're playing together. It's a ripe time for us to be reaching out and sharing God's story. And I mean, these last couple of generations have been very narrative based. I mean, they want the story that they're identifying with. This is why so many of these movements go so viral so quickly, is because they identify with the story of what's happening, and so they hop on board. Well, we've got the best story to tell in the entire world, the story of God and his working throughout history to bring us to him, and we don't know it and we don't share it.
Mm, mm. I try, I'm not maybe a pastor, but you try to help people the best that you can. You talk to them about the rights, the wrongs, values, beliefs, Jesus, God. But every Sunday I've been trying to just pick up something I picked up in church, and I'll post it, whether I do a good job at it or not. But I feel that if it gets just one person, if it touches just one person to want to visit maybe a better life or have a relationship with Jesus or God, I did my thing, right? I guess that if we all just did that one thing, just one thing,
Well, I mean,
and know that
you
we're
could
not
do.
going to be perfect.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the thing is, and I mean, Giulio, the best place, the place where faith happens the best is in the people you're the closest to, because they're the ones that see your life. And when they see God change you, transform you, and turn you into a different person, they can't ignore the fact that it's there.
Mm.
And that's, I mean, I always tell people, they're like, well, who am I supposed to reach? Start with your family. If you don't know who to start with, at least make sure your kids, your parents, your siblings, your whatever other family you've got, make sure you start there, because they know you, they've seen you, and
Who's the first people you would
invest.
save in any crisis?
Christ, oh my, well, absolutely, my kids.
Your family, right? I mean, the people you're
Exactly,
with, the people you love. And then,
exactly.
after you got them in a safe place, you'd probably, if you had a big heart and you're a loving person, you go out and save the rest. Do your best
Yep,
as you can to save as many as you can.
yep.
Um, you know, um, but here's the one thing I get, and I get it too. And sometimes I get really angry. Maybe you can help me with this and
hmm
help other people with this. We have a strong belief. We pray. We
hmm
give our hearts. We want a relationship, but shit falls on us. And excuse me, there I sinned again.
hmm
It just seems like it gets dumped over our head, and it's like, wait a minute, I'm doing all this, God. I'm praying to you.
hmm
And I get angry, so I don't pray for a couple nights, and then I ask for forgiveness because I was angry at him. I mean, what's going on? What do I need to do? Is there something I'm missing?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that the beginning of this is, one, when we accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, as we put our faith in Him, confirm that, whatever, however you want to term that within your faith movement, it doesn't mean that our life's going to go perfect. It's not going to be all this peachy roses and rainbows and whatever else you want to call them. I mean, there's no promise of that in Scripture, because that's what I love about the Bible more than anything else. When you read through the Bible, I mean, you can read almost every type of human situation happening over and over and over. I mean, there are stories of gang rape, there are of adultery, of incest, of I mean, all those things. You've got genocide. You've got children being massacred. You've got all of these things. You've got all of the emotions that possibly cover every. I mean, deep grief, depression, anxiety. I mean, everything is sitting in there. I mean, you can read real people going through real things, and most of them come to the point of, but God. Even though I'm feeling all of this, even though I'm going through all of this, but God, you are still there. You're still the rock. You're still my shield. You're still the one that keeps me. You're still the one that's shown me a better possibility. I mean, one of my favorite Psalms, Psalm 73, starts this way. As for me, my feet had almost slipped. I'd almost fallen off, meaning I'd almost just thrown away my faith. I just about thrown it away, because I'm looking around me, and here's all these wicked people. They're succeeding. They're enjoying life. They're going through this, and I feel
Mm,
like I've done all this for nothing. Done all this for nothing. until I came and sat in the presence of the Lord. And I realized that I'm not doing this for now. I'm doing this for the promises he's made, these eternal promises where I get to spend eternity with him in his presence with a perfect world again where everything is good. There is no sickness, there's no illness, there's no death, there's no suffering. That's what I'm doing this for. So my time here on earth is just for the purpose of serving him and bringing his truth and light into the world. And I know there's a better promise for me on the other side, even whatever happens, because we keep our eyes fixed on him during those times. And those times are invitations for us to go draw close to him, because he can handle our angriest moments. He can handle our most depressed moments. He can handle our most doubting moments. He can handle all of those things, because if we take the God of the Bible in his character, his word, he already knows them all anyways. So whether you tell him you're angry or not, he already knows you're angry.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what's funny is I have to say, even when I personally get angry for a couple of days and I'm like, I'm trying so hard, but there's a better purpose at the end of it. Things work out. For some reason, they always end up working out better, even if you still have to humble yourself a little bit, or he's re-humbling you a little bit. You say, okay, I get it, God. I get it. I get it. You did this for a reason. You made me go all through this because you had a better plan for me up ahead. And I think most people, if they don't look at life that way, that there's something better, they're always going to focus on what the worst is and draw closer to that without ever having the ability to see the good.
To me, Giulio, this is where the community of believers comes in so critical. This is what churches should be talking about, is what you just talked about. We need to be talking about and sharpening one another. We need to be bringing people together, because when you and I sit down and you say, man, I am just angry with God, this happened, and I say, Giulio, let's think about that. Let me bring you back to God for a minute. You know what? I'll put my arm around your shoulders and let's walk into God's presence for a minute and let's talk to him about that. It's a reminder, because we ourselves, we want to walk away, we want to turn around, we want to go away, and this is the role of the church. I mean, the church could just get it around themselves as a whole. Now, there's good churches everywhere. I'm not picking on any one church, but if church as a whole could focus in.
If churches, like I just mentioned, would talk more about knowing that there's a reason that God had you experience what you would experience, because there was something better, more humbling, more appropriate for you and your needs.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is equipping the saints and preparing the saints and moving as saints together, because this is where, I'm able to say, Giulio, I'm sorry you had to go through that. I hate that you had to go through that, even because we live in a fallen, broken world where stupid stuff like this happens all the time. But let's go into the presence of God for a minute and let's get his perspective on this. Because see, when we're gathered together and those types of things happen, then you can walk into Monday in a totally different mindset. You can walk into the week with a totally different mindset. You may still be angry. That's just emotion. You still got to deal with that anger. But, this is a place where you can say, now I've got a different perspective. I've taken a turn in my perspective, and now I can go forward with this. I have a path to follow now. And to me, it's, we're all walking this path together. It doesn't matter if you're pastor, not pastor, theologian, whatever. We're walking a path together because we're all on the road of following Jesus. And if we're doing what Jesus said, we're walking the narrow road, not the wide road, right?
Yeah.
Walking this narrow road.
I love that. I love that, because I had to really understand that parable, the wide gate and or the narrow road and the wide gate.
Yeah.
Which one are you taking?
Yeah. And there's no middle option. I mean, as much as all of us want that middle option, there's only one option.
And it is easier to go with the wide gate. And the wide gate means that you just follow other people and their beliefs, and so this way you don't have to deal with all the crap. But taking the narrow path is a lot more work, and I'd rather do a lot more work and understanding than just following people. I'm tired of following people, who lead me always to the wrong place or take advantage of me,
Well,
so I rather go to the narrow path and do the right homework and follow the right person, uh, which is Jesus's words. Because you got to be careful too who preaches to you and who lays hands on you as well.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because I mean, there are a lot of people out there speaking in the name of Jesus, and I am not the judge of all people. There's only one person who gets to do that. That's God.
Mm.
But what I hear them say worries me.
Yeah. You know how many times I've been deemed to hell? But anyway, and they said I would never be forgiven because I've sinned too much. But that's not how our God works, right?
Nope.
And especially when he says, and it took me a long time to understand it, those who come last are first.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
Yeah.
like, ooh, it sounds unfair, but wow, what a forgiving God, huh? You
Yeah.
know, when we look
Absolutely.
at that. But we don't have much more time because we want to respect everybody's time. We're about
Yep.
3 minutes over, but there's so much to talk about, and obviously we can get back together again and talk about a lot more.
Sure.
We'll probably have some questions coming in and so on and so
Absolutely.
forth. But we want to make it very clear: we weren't here today to judge anybody.
No.
What your sexual preferences and all this other. We were fighting the evil behind it.
Yes.
When people use it to lure, maybe it isn't God's vision of what he wanted, but the evilness that it has brought out lately in today's world, all of it, not because you're gay, not because you're transgender, not because you're non-binary, not because you're straight, not because you're gay. Everybody is with sin. There was only one sinless person, and that was Jesus. Now, and once again, it's not about your ethnicity. It's not about your sexual preference. It's not about your social economic background. What we're saying is we don't care. What we care is that you find the relationship that you need with God and Jesus Christ. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, Pastor.
Yeah, absolutely. Because here's the thing I believe firmly, Giulio, and I believe this is true for me as much as it's true for you and for any person listening to this podcast. God is going to deal with you as an individual if you'll let him. He will walk you down the path. If he needs to take you down a path of healing that allows you to heal in the innermost part of your being, things that you didn't even know need to be healed, he's going to do that. And that's going to change your view of him. It's going to change your view of the world. And ultimately, it may even change all of the behaviors everyone thought were good. I mean, there's things I used to do that I no longer do because I used to think it was okay to do those things. And now I've realized it's not okay to do those things. And I mean, we don't have time to go into that list, right?
Come on, David, spill it.
But I mean, seriously, I mean, any one of us could talk about that list, and some people would laugh because some of our lists are like, oh, well, I had this little issue and I had that little issue, and some people have huge issues. I mean, I don't envy any of the people who went through child abuse or child molestation or anything like that. I mean, those things are incredibly terrible crimes and traumas that happen in people's lives, but God can bring healing even into those lives in ways that we can't even explain.
True. And I've been through some experiences in my early life that there has a lot of healing has come from it that people don't even know about. And I imagine there's a bunch of other people out there. Like you said, we have a list that people don't even know about us. That if they did, they'd be like, why are you still smiling and not crying? Well,
Yep.
because I found the healing through my God, my Christ, and my Lord, my Savior.
Yep.
Listen, David, today we kind of flopped all over the place because there is so many questions and so much to learn, and I want to have you back and do that. But in the war, in the what was that of the gods, the
Return of the gods. Yep.
Yeah. What is your last thought of that? What should we look out for, and what should we be prepared for?
Well, and I think you said it well earlier, Giulio. It's we pay attention to is what gets our focus. And so, to me, get to know God's story first, because if you want to enter into the spiritual war, you have to know who you're worshiping first. then you can start walking in. Now, I did a sermon series the beginning of the year, January through first week in January through about middle of February on this very topic. Pawnee Christian Church Facebook group. If you go back and find the sermon starting, I think January 7th would be the first one, I think. I did six sermons, and I start with that. Who are we worshiping? Who is this God that we're worshiping? And I walk through that. And, if your listeners are really trying to hear some of this more about the return of the gods, I talk about those things and some of the issues that are brought up through that. But really that beginning point for me is get into God's story. Then you can start entering that spiritual warfare as you see who God is. And if you're a Christian, already know God's story, start moving into that place where you can start taking up your weapons and start fighting.
Wow. Good advice. Well, listen, stay on. Don't go anywhere. I want to chat with you a little bit more as Glenn wraps this all up for us. And for everybody listening out there, thank you for your patience. And once again, if I set off your ADDHD off, I apologize. But if you took one thing out of this today, and it can help you towards your life, I am so extremely happy. And I want to thank Pastor David for taking the time out to speak with us, because I know he's very busy as well. And we can pick his brain a lot more. So if you have questions, send it in to us. And when we have the pastor back on, maybe we can ask those questions and kind of attack some of those things that you're thinking, or maybe you've been told some that misled you. But anyway, we're always here for you. Glenn will put down the what is it on there? The website. The website. I'll put the website, and you can email it to us. Boy, you could tell I'm a baby boomer, right, David? But anyway, we'll talk to you soon. And as always, God bless you and have a wonderful, safe, and joyous week. Thanks.